All right, it is 11:30. Let's just get started because we have a lot to cover today. It looks like this is going to be a very well-attended lunch and learn, and we are very excited as that maybe excited isn't the right term to use for the topic, but we think that this is a very prescient topic to be talking about, which we'll get to in a minute with our speakers that we're very honored to have here today. But continue to put your name and introduce yourself into the chat. Your name, position, organization, and where in Wisconsin you're located, so that other people can find resources and connect with you as we continue to do these. So thank you so much for joining our penultimate, second to last virtual info session of the year. We are very, very honored that you would all join us. These obviously couldn't be as successful as they are without you. So thank you all for taking the time out of your day and half of your lunch break to join us. So I am Landon Solano. I will be hosting today. I am a communication specialist at Forward Service Corporation. If you have any questions about these lunch and learns, suggestions, feedback, you can always reach out to me at lsolano@fsc-corp.org. We only have one more session, as I said, left this year, and it will be on internet and utility access. That will be in November. The specific date will be forthcoming. I will send it out in the upcoming newsletter where you probably found the RSVP for today's lunch and learn, excuse me. Just so you know, today's meeting will be recorded and will be provided to you or for future reference. If you are unable to attend these events, you can RSVP and you will be put on the list to receive the video recording of these sessions on Friday of this week. We will also include a slide deck, the PDF version of everything we're discussing, as well as a list of all of our FSC service locations throughout Wisconsin. Just one quick note on our mission here at Forward Service Corporation, which is individual care. We are dedicated to meeting individuals on their own terms. Everyone that comes through our doors, no matter which office throughout Wisconsin, is treated with respect, and we'll work tirelessly to connect them with the resources that they need to succeed in their dreams. We hope that you'll consider connecting with Forward Service Corporation when you have someone that we can both serve. So we're going to talk a little bit about our topic today, which is evictions, knowing your rights, and understanding the resources available to you and your clients, the people that you serve. Most of us have lived in an apartment or at least dealt with a landlord of one type or another at some point in our lives. And it's not always easy to understand what course of actions that we can take if one of us happens to face an unfortunate situation. Today, we are incredibly honored to welcome the Tenant Resource Center out of Dane County to talk about what are evictions. They're going to talk a little bit about the services that they provide, including defining what an eviction is, what we can do, what the different kinds of notices that you can receive as a tenant are, then go into a little bit of what our rights are. And we will talk and touch on resources that are available that you can pass on to the people that you serve should they be facing a situation. So why are we talking about evictions? Well, statistics have come out that say that evictions have returned to pre-pandemic levels and are expected to exceed them. The data that I received was only as of August, so we may have exceeded it by this point in the year. Evictions, I'm not the expert. We're going to bring the expert on in just a moment to talk about it, are potentially devastating to a person's life and a disruption to being able to move forward in any aspect of their lives. I want to introduce Chris Belli and Timo, the Associate Director of the Tenant Resource Center, to speak a little bit about this. Chris Belli, we're so thankful that you're here today to talk to us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me into this amazing platform with a lot of people I see, and it's great. Um, I'm very excited to be able to share some information and help others and in the community as well. And I think that's one of the biggest situations. The biggest issue is that people don't know what they don't know, right? So being able to come here, sit down, educate, and give you the tools you need to help others and share the information with the community is one of our biggest visions here at the TRC is empowering our tenants and communities, landlords, service providers to be able to take decisions for themselves and take the right decision, you know?
Absolutely.
I sorry, I do want to let you know, I believe my coworker Brian Tebow will not be able to make it.
Okay.
Last moment, sorry,
Oh,
but
it's
I'm
okay.
here.
We're just thankful that you're here. So, I would like you to share your screen and the slides that you've prepared for today. But I was wondering if we can maybe start this topic off on kind of a more personal level as far as what I want to set the scene for what someone's experience can be when they're facing eviction. I feel like starting there to understand the humanity, the human level part of it, and then
Yeah.
we can talk about what it is and how we can start to fix it. Can you, without naming names, I guess give us what that can potentially look like for someone?
Yeah. Well, we see it every day here at the office. We have people, and I mean, it varies per family, per situation, but I can like point out one of the main things is that having an eviction filing, just the filing on like here in Dane County, it's like having it on CCAP, just simply having the filing on there, that already creates a huge barrier for looking for housing. Um, why? Because it's the first thing that a lot of landlords look for on CCAP. Like, do you have an eviction filing? Whether it's dismissed because you completed with the agreement, whether it was dismissed before even going to court. Um, a lot of the times that information is just dismissed by landlords, so they don't actually look at the details that are on CCAP.
Mhm.
So
And you're
we're
saying,
talking,
sorry, just to clarify for myself, you're saying if you've been given a notice or have faced eviction in the past, even if it wasn't justified or didn't go through, that could affect someone's ability to find housing moving forward.
correct, having a
Yeah.
filing with the clerk of court's office is automatically a barrier moving forward.
Yeah.
Um, but then again, like you have that specific barrier when looking for housing, but when you are in eviction process, you are most of the time for not for what we've seen, more than 50% of the cases are rent based cases, which means income is not coming in as nicely and flowing in through the household. We have single mothers, we have POCs, we have subsidized housing. So it's a lot of vulnerable people who are going through these different situations in life, and so on top of the filing, you have the emotional stuff, you have the school, you have the court date. So it's like either you miss it and you get a default,
Mm.
or you go to it, but then you already missed an hour of work. So you still lose. You know, and
Yeah.
then go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think many people on this call can understand, they see these cycles that people get caught in and how do you break out of them? Because one thing begets another,
Mhm.
and the situation just grows more dire in some situations.
Yeah. And like I said, we see these on a daily basis. Sometimes people come in and they don't even know they had a default, but they had a sheriff come in knocking in their house, like, all right, it's time to pack up and go. And tenants are like, wait, what? There's a lot of scenarios, you know. There's cases where people aren't able to make it to the hearing due to incarceration, being in the hospital, and not getting the service. So it's being able to direct them to the place of where they need to go to hopefully be able to reopen that case and see if that's going to be a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, I'd love to have you start to present your materials. One thing I forgot to mention to everyone, we will have a Q&A after the presentation. So put your questions into the chat and we will cover them at that time. I already see one or two questions starting to come in. So that'll be a great discussion to have following the information that you're providing. Perhaps you'll answer some of them as we go along.
Yeah. Let me figure out how to do this. Again, me and Tag are not the best friends, so bear with me.
Yeah. Here,
There
I'll
we
stop
go.
sharing and then maybe you can share.
There we go. And here we go. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Absolutely. Looks good.
Perfect. Now let me see if I can make it. There we go. There we go. I'm getting better at this, you guys.
Hey, look at that.
All right, so as Landon spoke a little bit about it, I will talk a little bit about our program, just general tenant resource center services. As he did state, we are located in Dane County. A lot of our services are essentially Dane County. So if I get a little bit into the weeds when talking about the eviction process, do know that it's Dane County, like Court of Clerks, and it's the small claims for Dane County. All other places are different. I don't know the process for other counties. I really know. I just by heart, I know the Dane County one. So just giving you a heads up before I get into this. So TRC services. We currently provide housing counseling. We do walk-ins, we do emails, we do phone calls. Our phone calls right now are skyrocketing because things are just picking back up after COVID, and people and everyone is starting to move forward, so there's a lot of notices. People are at home a lot more. So we're getting a lot more picking up on those calls and stuff. We also have a campus office for UW University. We have and those are we staff those Tuesdays and Thursdays 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. students. And then we also have a little satellite office in Goodman South here in Madison as well, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturdays. All of these services that are here, we provide those at these different locations as well. So we also do mediation. Our mediation service is upstream and at court. So we have a mediator and 2 volunteers that help us do this. So we are essentially at court every Tuesday. In Dane County, we have eviction court hearings Tuesdays and Wednesday afternoons. And at each court hearing, we have a mediator available. We have a housing counselor available. We have an EDDP staff available. So it's a full day Tuesday, afternoon Wednesdays. So today, 1:30 to 3, we'll have someone available. Eviction Diversion and Defense Partnership, as I stated, that's our EDDP program. This program emerged from COVID. We got a lot of funding, so we were able to explore and create a bigger program, which right now it assists people who are facing an eviction case. We have received a summoning complaints from the court's office. We have our team of 11 people. They will follow up with you, reach out, ask questions, and they're available to help you navigate the system within regards to how to appear to court, because right now in Dane County, court is via Zoom. So we have people either come on in and we'll have them set them up in this office, or we can, if needed, we can go to them with the computer if they're not able to make their way either here or to downtown. Sometimes they can go to the courthouse and they will be able to assist them there, or they can call in. But it's a lot of numbers. It's a whole lot of situation. Not everybody is tech savvy. Not everybody has a phone. Not everybody has transportation. So we try to be as careful as we can to be able to give those people the ability to appear, because not appearing is already a default. We assist with rental assistance for backward rent and possible forward rent. We also help with light touch of housing navigations. When we connect them with an attorney, because we are partnered with 4 different attorney firms, we're able to connect them with them through this program for free legal representation at these eviction court hearings. So again, having an attorney represent you at court will completely change the outcome of whatever it is that's going on, whether it's just rent, whether it's waste, whatever the case is. We have our health and housing. We are partnered with UW Medicine for that. And then we have a lot of community outreach. We do a lot of these presentations. We tailor our presentations in regards to what these service providers want and or need. I believe it was last month we did a training for case managers here in Dane County and the city of Madison in regards to tenant landlord law. So we just went through the whole process. It was a two half days, not 2 full days, 2 half days. And we were able to go through a lot of questions and be able to help them and equip them so that they are able to help the people they're serving, because we see things differently. So we can't advocate here at the Tenant Resource Center. We give you the information and let you choose how you please to use this information and what works best for you and your family. But case managers have the authority to do a little bit more than we do. So being able to tailor these presentations specifically for case managers, we're like, when you are writing this letter, make sure you have this. It is helpful if you have that, or giving a bigger picture. And we do have bilingual Spanish services. We have a Spanish speaker in all of our teams right now, and that's amazing. We are really proud of that because for a long time we were missing an admin Spanish speaker, and we have them. So just sharing a little bit of that. Okay. So like I said earlier, our housing counseling team, we empower and educate our tenants, landlords, service providers, and just the community in general. We talk about rental rights and responsibilities, and we are always here to connect with the community and service providers. And if we can't have the answer or we don't have the answer for the tenant and or service provider or landlord, we have continued to create that bond and connection with other organizations that were able to do a soft handover of whatever situation that we have going on. Not with everybody, of course, right? But we're slowly but surely, we're getting there. And I'm proud of that too. Like I said, we have a remediation service. We have 2 volunteers, 1 lead, and we do upstream and at court. Upstream mediation is not something that's fully used right now, unfortunately, because there's no carriage to it. Like, what does the landlord get if we use mediation before I file at court, And when you're at court, well, there's a lot that you get, probably rental assistance and or backable rent, or you get a move out date. Like I said, EDDP, court navigation, rental assistance, like touch of finding housing after an eviction. We follow up, making sure that the tenant understands what they just agreed upon at court, because sometimes when you're in that moment, there's so much going through your head that you're just like, yeah, sure. But then afterwards, you're like, wait, what did I just agree to? Or you're like, wait, I said a move out date or I said I can pay by this date. And that's one of the biggest things when I used to staff court. I would just like budge in there and be like, please look at your calendar before you say I can pay my rent on this day and this day. Make sure it aligns with your pay date, Those are the little details that I think are very important when doing a stipulated or a dismissal or anything in the regards, because again, if you default that, it's a whole other story. We have free attorneys, and here are the ones that we currently are partner with. It's Community Justice, Legal Action of Wisconsin, People's Law Center, and UW Eviction Defense Clinic, and they are amazing. So a lot of our places that we do training and outreach, we also do a lot of schools, resource fairs, neighborhood and community organization events, government meetings. I will say that I had a government meeting type thingy a couple of months ago, and it amazes me sometimes, like sharing that information. Sometimes we're so used to seeing stuff, we're so with the work that we do that we're like, oh, it's common sense, right? Everybody knows this. But then when you are you're in different places, you're in different communities, you're like, oh, you don't know, let me tell you a little bit about what's going on in the real world. So I like being able to do that. I like being able to give you that human to human interaction, and this is what really is going on, and this is how things are being affected. So I say we love that. Okay, so the main reason why we're all here today is evictions. Like I said, it's going to be general overview within Wisconsin statutes 704 and ATCP 134. Just before we get to anything, like I said earlier, there's a lot of resources that I know of here in Dane County. But if you are specifically not in Dane County, and you're like, where can I refer this person to because they have an eviction filing, they got the summons and complaints, and they need legal assistance like now. The best two places that I can refer you all to is to Lawyers for Learners. They are based out of Milwaukee, I believe, and they just, even though it's lawyers for learners, they don't only help students. They're very open to anyone and everyone as well. They can direct you to who can help you and if there's any assistance, but they are based for evictions filings as well. They are connected with Legal Action in Wisconsin, which is another person that, or another organization that would highly encourage you guys to reach out to if there is a person who has an eviction filing. And if you are in Dane County, you can reach out to us. We are here to be able to help you and the tenants as best as we can. And if we can't, there's other attorneys that can. Well, not other, because we're not attorneys, but other organizations that can. Okay, so as it states in the books, an eviction is a rental agreement termination process that a landlord uses to remove a tenant when the landlord believes the tenant has violated either the rental agreement or a landlord-tenant law. The eviction process starts with less formal notice to the tenant, proceeds to a formal summons and complaints that starts the court eviction process. So again, this is the general overview. The way that the process goes on is different from county to county, or maybe it's not, right? I don't know. I should probably look into counties just so I can get some type of information and not always be like, I don't know.
Can I ask a quick question while we're on that specific thing? I guess I'm here to ask the dumb question, so no one else has to. The eviction, let me rephrase this. The tenant rights are set by the state, but the process in which you go through these things are set by the county or the city?
County.
The county. Okay, cool. So the rights don't change, but the process in which you can move forward with these things legally are changed by county.
Yeah, they could be.
Okay.
And it might be just a little thing or it might be a big thing. I know that there's a county where they require mediation for a small claims court. And then there's others that like we don't require mediation for small claims court in general. Which I wish we would, but who am I? So yeah, it just varies from county to county.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. So there is some definitions here I want to talk to you all about. So we have a term tenant. A term tenant is someone who lives in a unit with a lease that has a specific and defined starting and end date. So essentially this would be a person that has a month, year lease, and they pay their rent regularly on the first of each month, right? We have a periodic tenant. A periodic tenant is usually a month-to-month tenant, week-to-week tenant, or day-to-day tenant, whatever they have discussed. And usually they pay their rent. If it's month-to-month, they can pay it on the first of the month. If it's week-to-week, on the first week of a Monday of each week, and therefore. So and then we have a tenant at will. This is my favorite one. So a tenant at will is a tenant who doesn't necessarily have a valid lease, but they have different arrangements with the person that they're living with. So let's say Landon, I asked you to let me crash on your couch for a couple of days, and then you're like, okay, cool, but then you have to leave on Friday, but I don't. But I continue to buy groceries every week. So I am somehow giving you something in return. And that's why I become a tenant at will. It's really weird. So, but they are tenants. And then at that point, there's requirements for this eviction process to take place.
That seems like it could take many different types of shapes and get real messy very quickly.
Oh yes, again. Yeah. I know we literally have calls where people are like, so I just can't kick them out. I mean, you could, right? But there's actual legal process you have to go through to remove the person from your house. Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So there we go. So When we are talking about an eviction, there is six statutory violations, and they are failure to pay rent, waste violation, a breach of another term in the agreement, nuisance or criminal activity, the Safe Housing Act, and holding over. So I'm going to go over all of these. The most common one that we see is rental payments and waste. So essentially everything falls in within those two categories. So either a tenant didn't pay rent and they're falling behind, or they violated a term in their lease. So I have a dog, I'm not supposed to have a dog, and they let me know twice now and I still have the dog. So they can be like, all right, we're filing for an eviction. We have the breach of another term in the lease. This includes the tenant breaking any other requirement in the agreement. For example, having an authorized pet, right? Or having someone else that's not on the lease live with you. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I see, mostly in the Latino community, where people are like, yeah, you can come live with me, it's okay. But then the landlord doesn't know. So next thing you know, the landlord finds out by someone like a neighbor or something, and then they're like, oh, okay, this is not okay. So, but then you're like, well, I can't kick my cousin out, right? Um, so those little things become a problem for you. So that's why you have to be very careful. And as case managers, I always tell them, like, I know people want to be nice, but you need to remember that this is your home. And at the end of the day, the person affected is going to end up being you.
Can I ask? I mean, I know you're here supporting tenants. I would imagine it's probably useful to know what rights the landlords have as well, and why a landlord might see more people in a unit than the agreement, says. Why that might be a problem? Because I would imagine that a lot of people might not understand. Well, what's the big deal? Why would that be a problem?
Well, I mean, essentially, when you're signing a lease, it's a contract, right?
Mhm.
So there's two people in the lease, and they got their background check. They got their credit check. It's usually depending on what the landlord's main things are, but those are two of the main things they do. They run their credit and background check. And if you have someone else living in there that's not authorized, first of all, you're already violating the contract that you have. So that's an automatic like red flag for the landlord. There's only should be two people in there. Now, if you want to add someone, you can ask the landlord, hey, I would like to add someone else to the unit. Is that okay? There is also the issues with like occupancy. Depending on where you live and the zoning, the landlord could potentially get in trouble for having too many people in that unit. So there's reasons, or sometimes it's just the fact that you went above and you just didn't care about the landlord's authorization and you did you. Um, but I can say that most of the reasons why people do this is because they're just being helpful. They're not trying to step over a landlord or anything like that. They're just trying to be helpful to the people they're letting them stay.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I always say too, it's really helpful for tenants to talk to their landlords and like, how can we work this out? They really need to stay somewhere. Maybe even like, can we move to a different unit and have them added to the lease? So these are things that can happen, it's just a matter of communication.
As is the case in so many situations.
Yeah. Um, So yeah, and then we have the nuisance and criminal activity. So usually the nuisance is the landlord is notified by law enforcement that the property is a drug or criminal gang nuisance. It is not required that anyone be arrested for this procedure to be used, but it is necessary that the landlord receives a formal written finding from the local police department. So if a landlord were to give a 5-day nuisance to a tenant, they would need to add to this 5-day notice what was the issue, add the written documentation they got from the local police department, and then also add to that notice that they have the opportunity to challenge this eviction. And this is just eviction notice, okay? This is not the official one, it's just the notice. So However, it is not lawful for a landlord to use the law against the victim of the crime. So that's really important. If I have guests over and they're the ones that did it, even though they're my guests, you might still be liable for that, because at the end of the day, they're under you. We have the criminal activity one. So criminal activity is also a 5-day notice that they can give you. And usually this type of 5-day notice is non-curable for criminal activity. And sometimes it doesn't have to be anything in writing explaining it. I mean, the landlord should give the reasoning why they're giving you the 5 criminal activity one, but as soon as you get it, it's really important that somebody follows up right away. And we have the Safe Housing Act. The Safe Housing Act is when either the tenant wants to remove themselves from the unit, from the property, or the tenant wants to remove the aggressor. That could be a neighbor or a person living in your unit with you from the property. And Safe Housing Act, this is something they can enact as well, and there's ways to do that. But that's another story. So, and then we have holding over. Another reason for an eviction is, like I said, if we have a month-to-month, or we have a year lease and my year lease ends on October 31st, if I am still in the unit by November 1st, I am essentially a holdover. I'm holding over because I'm no longer supposed to be in the unit. I was supposed to be on October 31st, right? So that November 1st, since I'm still in the unit and I no longer have authorization to be there, the landlord can and does have the right to just give me no notice whatsoever and file an eviction action and take me to court to remove me from the unit. There is important things to know though about like holding over. If it comes to be November 1st and there's like a portal, an online portal, and I pay my rent, and the landlord takes it, then that essentially becomes a month-to-month because he's taking the money. Now, if he decides to like reject it or remove that online portal, like come November 1, then I have no way to pay my rent, right? A big issue that I've seen that people, sometimes when you have a year lease, you forget when your lease terminates. I mean, if you have a memory like I do, I don't remember when my lease ends. So I'm just over here hoping that the landlord will give me an FYI, here's a renewal, or here's some information. So it comes to that point, I send in a check, but I'm not checking my bank account. So I'm here believing that, oh, they did take it, but they didn't. Next thing I know, I have a court filing. It's just like, oh, wait, but they didn't take it. So I am holding over and there is no month-to-month tenancy established there. So it's those little pieces that happens so much more than we can think. People just forget when their lease is over. People usually don't keep copies of their lease. It's very common because they usually just give you one copy at the beginning of your tenancy, and then there is no requirement for them to give you another one. I mean, if you lose it, the best thing that you can do is like, hey, I can't do my part of the bargain if I don't have a copy, so can I get a copy of it, you know? But it's not like they're not statutorily required to give you another. So what I do tell a lot of people is like, as soon as you get that lease, take a picture of it, email it to yourself, and then it's going to be somewhere in your email, like 5-10 years from now, for however long you're in the unit, unless you lose the password. But that's not okay. So yeah. So these are all the reasons why anyone could potentially see themselves in eviction, filing and all that good stuff, right? So how do people receive a notice? Like I said, the proper type of notice depends on the type of lease, as I said. So whether you have a month-to-month, whether you have a 1-year lease. So the notices may be for more than 5, 14, or 30 days. These are the minimal requirements. So for tenants with a lease of 1 year or less, if I don't pay my rent, let's say October 1st, I'll get a 5-day notice from my landlord letting me know you need to pay your rent within 5 days. And if not, you'll have to move out. So it's a 5-day curable notice, right? So let's say I didn't pay my rent on no, sorry, let's say I did pay my rent on the 5th day. So then November comes and then I don't pay my rent again. So at this time, the landlord has the option to either give me another 5-day curable, or they can give me a 14-day non-curable. So if they give me a 5-day curable, again, I just pay my rent before the 5th day ends and we're set. But within that same year, and if he decides to give me a 14-day non-curable, then that means that on the 15th day, I need to leave. But I'm still liable for that rent, right? I'm still liable for the rent, and I'm still liable for the continuance of my lease. So it is very important that we know that, because it's still going to be there. It's not going anywhere. And having like a forwarding address and all this information so that you don't have all this in your back. Because if they call and they reference your old landlord, they're going to be like, they left, they didn't pay, they still owe a couple of months rent. So that's there. Any questions with that? Oh, you said questions at the end. Sorry.
Well, I could see, it's obvious how confusing it can get to people if they don't stay on top of all this information and if it's not clearly communicated. But imagine from the landlord's part, it's like they make one effort and don't follow up, or just whatever, how quickly this can unravel.
Yes. Yep. So then the same thing. So if in a 1-year lease, I buy a dog and my landlord, now this is a waste, right? So like I said, there's essentially just 2 categories at the end of the day: rent and waste. So if I buy a dog in August, and in August the landlord gives me a 5-day, like, all right, Chris Belly, you need to get rid of the dog because in the lease it says you can't have dogs. So I'm like, okay, I got rid of the dog. And then come November, I'm like, you know what? I want a dog. So I go get another dog. And then my landlord's like, I told you, you can't have dogs, Chris Belly. So this is a waste or a violation of the lease. So then they have to give me, again, either a 5-day or a 14-day non-curable. So then I decide what to do. So it can't be, oh, I got a 5-day rent and then I got a 14-day waste. It has to be the same thing in the same year. Does that make sense?
Barely. But I mean, I think that's indicative of how much people have to stay on top of and understand these things. I mean, it does make sense, but like that's just from the tenant's perspective, like having to have an understanding of something completely outside of the realm of what they typically deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. This is like, you have to be, as soon as you get notices, you have to be on top of it and give the information and get rid of stuff, and So for tenants with a lease of more than 1 year, the landlords are required to give you a 30-day notice in writing, unless your lease says differently. So if we have a lease of 2 years, no matter what I do, no matter what I violate on the lease, no matter if I pay rent late every single month, landlord would have to give me a 30-day notice every single time, unless something says differently in our lease. We don't see a lot of these, FYI. It's really hard to see these because it's harder to remove somebody from the unit then. For periodic tenants, the landlords can give a 5-day notice with the right to cure for all violations, or they can give a 14-day notice to vacate. So, and for this instance, we do see a lot of like 4 days. No, we do see a lot of 5 days curable and then 5-day again. So seeing that just 14-day not curable move out, we don't see that a lot. I'm not sure why, but I think it's good. But then they also have the option, since if it's a month-to-month tenancy or anything in the regards, a landlord might just give you a 28-day heads up, like, all right, we're done, 28 days and you're out. And that's totally okay. So resolving a notice, like I said, if it's curable, you have the right to write back to the landlord and explain your part of it and how you managed it. And if you don't, then you'll have to move out, and just make sure you have a forwarding address so that you can get all the information still to you and you don't stay with the balance. And if there is any type of balance, you're able to work on a payment plan moving forward. Like I said, curable people like, how do I cure a warning because I was being loud according to a neighbor? Writing a letter letting the landlord know, like, hey, I wasn't home this day that I was accused of being loud, or hey, I will make sure that my TV doesn't exceed 50 volume moving forward. Just being able to keep that documentation that you replied to the landlord, like I did my part, like I replied, and even if they don't reply back, you can't make up an email. Like it's right here. I cured or attempted to cure that 5-day notice. You didn't reply. We never had any issues after that. And then I think the easiest thing is like the pet or like a tenant living with you that they're not supposed to, because you can be like, come in my house, they're no longer in there. So it is really important that we're all aware that a landlord cannot remove the tenant's belongings from the unit. They can't turn off utilities, they can't turn off the water, because that is considered an illegal self-help eviction. The landlord should follow the legal process of removing someone from the unit. And I like to just always say this, just because this is not right, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. This does happen, and what we usually tell people to do or give people the option is that you can call your local police department, letting them know, like, hey, I have been removed. So I have been illegally removed from my unit, and if you have police available, that show it to them, and then they should be able to help you get back into your unit because there's no eviction. Or another thing that one of my coworkers recently brought up was, again, if you're in Dane County, CCAP, Wisconsin, right? You can do CCAP and see if there's an eviction filing, and you can essentially show your local police department, like, there's no eviction filing on my record, there's nothing pending, so this is still my unit and I'm still able to live in it. So sharing that information with a local department and or sheriff department, whichever is easiest. So I did want to touch base a little bit on resolving, how and when people should give the notice. So for both sides, so the eviction notice, the termination notices, so eviction notices, not the summary complaints. So the eviction notice, which is a 5-day, 14-day notices, 28-day notices, should be in writing, and they should all have the basic information for eviction notice. So whether the tenant can fix the issue, so it's curable or not curable. If the basis of the eviction notice is the landlord was notified that the property or drug nuisance, then they should add that to the eviction notice. If the basis of the eviction notice is an alleged criminal activity, the notice must also include a description of the criminal activity. If the basis is an eviction of an imminent threat to a tenant or the safety of the child, the Safe Housing Act, the landlord should have the documentation that the tenant provided to them on that notice as well, as proof for why that notice is being given. So the time period to cure or vacate most likely starts the day that the notice was received. The last day of the notice period counts unless the last day falls on a Sunday or a holiday. So if I get my notice, let's see, I think I have an example here. So a 5-day move out or cure notice is given on Wednesday, December 6th. December 20th, Wednesday, December 20th. The first day is Thursday, December 21st. So I received it on 20th, but the first day is 21st. The 5th day would be on a Monday, December 25th. The tenant must move out or cure by Tuesday, December 26th, because December 25th is a holiday. If the 5th day move out or cure notice is on the Thursday, December 21st, the first day would be Friday, December 22nd. And the 5th day when the tenant must either move out or cure would be December 26th. Counting days is one of the most hardest things to do. So the more you do it, the easiest it gets. But essentially just remembering that once you get a notice, if it falls on a Sunday or a holiday, it doesn't count. It moves to the next consecutive day. So delivering the notice, not my personal favorite, but the notice must be given to a person or to a non-tenant who is a competent person. in the tenant's family that looks at least 14 years of age. So the notice is considered to be given the day after giving the notice. Delivering in person to a non-tenant who is a competent person is apparently in charge of the tenant unit or occupying the unit, and mailing a copy of the notice to the tenant at their last known address. Or you can, if the landlord has diligently attempted to serve this notice to the tenant and they haven't been able to, and diligently means tried 3 times at 3 different days, the landlord can then post it on their door and mail it to the last known address. This seems to become an issue because if the tenant is no longer in the unit or the tenant is hospitalized or anything in the regards, they're not going to get the mail and they're not going to get the one on their door because they're not going to be home. So next thing you know, the tenant couldn't cure notice because they weren't there. So then they don't know they have an eviction filing because they're not in the unit. And when they come back, they're like hit with all these different things. And then it's a whole other thing. It happens a lot. So yeah, I think that mostly covers, that mostly covers all of the information I have for you all. Unless, yep.
All right,
It's
well,
like,
yeah, we have 2 questions in the chat. I imagine some will come up. I also have a few questions of my own, just based on what you've presented, which was
Yeah.
very dense and I think something worth studying. You can see why there's entire fields dedicated to helping people like this. It's a lot to go through. Just a quick observation, and this is not to make light of it at all. I'm just shocked at how one of the things that seems the most helpful to avoid anything, even before evictions, but even during that process, is just having a calendar. That is wild to me. I mean, to know what the specific dates are of when you receive notices and being able to count, that just staying organized seems like it would be a huge help to keep people on top of things.
yeah, it's definitely a whole lot of making sure that as soon as you get the notice, you are proactive about it. But not everybody can.
Yeah. I have 2 questions here that kind of dovetail into one another. The first is the first part, I guess, will be how can someone who's been evicted keep it from impacting their ability to rent from future places? And the other side of that is how long does the information stay on their CCAP?
Yeah, so I'll answer that question first. So depending on what happened with the case, usually if it was a stipulated dismissal, it means that they came up with an agreement at the first hearing. It's usually for 2 years if the tenant complies with the agreement. If they don't, or they don't appear in general, it's a default judgment, and it can be in your CCAP for up to 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. The other question, how can we make sure that a filing doesn't affect you finding housing, correct? There isn't a way that's not going to affect you. To be honest, it's going to be there. It's going to happen. The things that I suggest that people do is make sure that you check how long it has been since the eviction, because if it's been more than like 5+ years, I would give the option of trying to redact your name or seal your name from the record. There's like legal tune-up that can help you do that. It's a online program with attorneys, Legal Action of Wisconsin, or any other housing attorney that can help you like look at your case and be like, all right, maybe we can seal this and then you can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Or another thing that we have is we have templates, letter templates that explain what happened in the past that will not happen now. A big thing right now is like I had an eviction filing because of COVID, and as you are aware, a lot of us lost our employment through that time.
Mm-hmm.
This will not happen anymore because I am well established, I have employment, and here's what I plan to do to make sure that I don't fall behind in rent. So I think it's always being upfront about the situation with the landlord before they start investigating or seeing stuff,
Right.
or they call your previous landlord and they're like, well, yeah, they were not paying rent. Well, yeah, but you forgot the fact that it was during COVID time, you know?
Mhm. I mean, sounds like a simple but effective resource to have those letter templates, which
Mhm.
dovetails into another question. Earlier in your presentation, when you were talking, you'd mentioned lawyers for learners. The someone was asking a question about what the second resource for Dane County was that you had mentioned.
Oh, I think it was Legal Action Wisconsin and Lawyers for Learners.
Okay, legal action
Yeah.
Wisconsin. Okay,
Yep.
which you just mentioned, fantastic. And then another question has just come in. I'm just going to read this verbatim. I'm currently working with someone whose landlord discriminately raised the rent, fully knowing that they couldn't afford it. But this landlord hasn't been keeping the rental property up to code, such as no insulation and having chipmunks, critters around the place. I guess it's more of a comment, but do you have a reaction to that?
Yeah. My first thought would be, is there any documentation in regards to these repair requests? And if there is, probably following up with one more, depending on how long this has been going on for.
Mhm.
And then the building inspector or public health in your area, having them come out. I know a lot of people are scared of retaliation, but having all this documented will help. If they are discriminating, then you potentially might have a case for a filing of discrimination,
Mhm.
fair housing complaint. Another question that I do have though is, we need to remember, or this is other stuff. If they have a year-long lease, they can't increase the rent in the middle of the lease.
Mhm.
If it's a month-to-month tenancy, the landlord must give a 28-day written notice, letting them know that they will be increasing the rent. Because at that sense, then it at least gives the tenant the option to, yes, I'm okay with that increase, and yes, I will stay, or you know what, no, thank you for the 28 notice, I'll find somewhere else to move. But they shouldn't be doing this in the middle of a lease.
Right. What they're saying, it's at the end of the lease, all has been verbal communication. They've been talking about the repairs for years. So what sort of what first step do you think? You said reaching out to
I think
the
it depends
code.
on what.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will depend a lot what the tenant wants to do. So if they
Mhm.
want to stay in the unit, I think it would be useful for them to reach out to the building inspector or public health, again, depending on where you are in Wisconsin, and if there is a building inspector or not.
Yeah.
But if the tenant wants to try to continue reaching out to the tenant, to the landlord in writing, they have the option, or they can also file a complaint with DATCAP, since DATCAP, which is Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection, they are the ones that oversee the ATCP 134 code, which essentially they oversee the whole violations for repairs in the, and they are able to reach out to the landlord and be like, hey, it seems like you have not been repairing this, or there's been these issues. They can give you a document, and they do some of sort of mediation.
Mhm. Um, I want to talk a little bit about resources again.
Mhm.
There's a question about, is there a network of organizations in Wisconsin that deal with evictions? Other partners that you might work with in other counties or um,
That's a very great question. There really isn't, but I like that. Um, no, like I said, we recently got connected to Lawyers for Learners, and they also help. They are also connected with a lot of other places in Wisconsin, so maybe that would be the start of something there. But there's not, to answer your question.
not yet.
Yes, not yet.
um, since we're talking about resources, I hope you don't mind. I would like to share just real quick I don't want to end the meeting. I want to share my screen.
Oh,
Um,
I can.
I
Stop
wanted to
there.
share your website real quick. This page I think is just incredible in terms of the amount of information you provide in terms of rights and resources for many different situations. And I want to just draw people's attention to this. Even if you're not in Dane County, I think there's a lot of great information here. There's a discrimination thing, foreclosures. Just if you want to know about evictions, can you speak just very briefly about, the kind of overview of what this includes?
Yeah. So a lot of these have there are links to other information. So we had talked about general eviction, what to expect. Like the information I just shared with you all. Behind a rent, like what do you do when you're behind a rent? What are your options? So we try to make this as friendly as we can for people to, if you can't come into our office, you can go into our website and be like, I'm going through this, what should I do? And it should lay out all of your options as a tenant and as a landlord too, because sometimes the landlord doesn't know what the eviction process is and or what's the lawful way to go about it. So coming in here and reading about the eviction process is something that we highly encourage both tenants and landlords to do. It gives you information how to end your lease, other ways that it's not just the eviction process or waiting until your term ends.
Mhm.
So we have, like I stated earlier, the self-help eviction, landlord entry. A lot of people are like, my landlord just came in, and is that legal? There's information about that, when and how they can come into your unit. Landlord retaliation, like I was just talking to you about, in regards to the person who's having some repair issues and the rent increase. So it points you to what options you have for retaliation if that's something that comes up with them. We have a list of motels that are nearby here that can help people if they're looking to move, and if they decide to end their lease beforehand or they end up being evicted, like here's, let's be proactive and talk about what we're looking for and how we're going to utilize these resources to find somewhere else while this is all going on. Or you know what, I have to move out because I'm holding over and I didn't know. This is your go-to. Or if you simply have like trying to find somewhere else because you already went through the eviction process, being able to get these letter templates and talk it through with the next prospective landlord.
We have time for one more question, which just came into the
Yeah.
chat, and then we have to
Yeah.
wrap up. I'm just going to read this verbatim again. I have a youth who works with their landlord and lives in one of the properties their landlord manages. The youth has been late on paying rent multiple times and fears that if she leaves her job with their landlord, they'll be evicted. She has fear because her landlord has made subtle comments suggesting this idea. What do you recommend she do to move forward?
This is a very tricky question. It depends whether if it's are they working for the landlord and getting housing because of that? Or do they have a full lease agreement and then they're just on the side working with them? And the reason it gets tricky is because if they are working to get the housing, as soon as they are terminated from employment, they can be terminated from the house with no eviction process. That is one of the categories that's not safe when we're talking about like the terms and terminations. But if there's an actual lease agreement that it's separate from their employment, then they still have to go through the eviction process, which is giving them a 5-day, 14-day notice within that year span, and explain and file for eviction and give them the full like serve situation. So it would still be a process. Now, I think it's really important that if this tenant continues to pay rent late because of they are getting paid late, maybe talking to the landlord, having something in writing saying, moving forward, I can pay you the rent on this date because this is when I get paid, and both persons sign the agreement, be okay with it, and keep a copy of that. That's the best suggestion I can give, but looking at what type of lease they have.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty complicated situation, even on top
Yeah.
of the potential eviction.
Yeah.
Christabel, I want to thank you so much for being here, and I encourage everyone to reach out with questions. I'll be happy to forward any questions on if you have more. And to check out all of the amazing resources Tenant Resource Center provides. We already answered questions. I just want to make a quick note with the last minute here that if you enjoyed today's session, you can help us develop our 2024 schedule by providing us feedback with a 2-minute survey. It really goes a long way to help us. We only have one more left this year, but we're hoping to tackle a whole lot more next year. So please give us your feedback. You can also follow us on social media at Forward Service Corporation or Forward Service Corp. Thank you all so much for joining us. Chris Belli, thank you to you and everyone at your resource center for everything that you do. It's a very important topic, and you're fighting the good fight.
Thank you. Thank you guys for inviting me. It was my pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. We will see you next month when we're going to talk about internet and utility access. Have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.